"Sign it, Elliot," Mark said. "You'll thank me someday anyway." The credit union lobby smelled like pen ink and pressure. A teller watched, pitying us, while Mark smiled like management. "It's family," he said, sliding forms closer, voice sugar and steel. I signed, and something inside me snapped without making noise. Mark winked at the manager and pocketed keys to new equipment. The loan officer shook hands like victory belonged only to brothers. "You'll thank me," Mark whispered, breath heavy with coffee and triumph. My name anchored debt heavier than anything our father ever carried. I swallowed pride and watched a future tighten like a fist. Payments missed within months, and collection calls burned through my phone. Mark said equipment delays, bad vendors, and unexpected seasonal downturns. My credit score fell like shingles in a windstorm suddenly. At Dad's old lot, Mark changed locks without looking ashamed. "Temporary," he said, "until you show real commitment to the company." Real meant obedient, unpaid, and always grateful for crumbs tossed downward. I slept in my minivan beside bleach and borrowed mops. Tessa slid coffee through a drive-through window before her shift. "Don't disappear," she said. "Let anger build something measurable and honest." Hank, the night janitor, offered routes nobody else wanted anymore. He taught me floors speak, and reliable ears make customers loyal. "Start nights," Hank said. "Let daylight judge you by results." I registered a DBA at the county office that afternoon. Beacon After Hours sounded small, but it glowed inside me. I printed flyers at a pharmacy copier, quarters stacked carefully. Gas stations let me tape them near pumps and windshield squeegees. People glanced, smirked, then returned to lottery tickets and headlines. That night, I scrubbed a laundromat until tiles reflected ceiling fans. Bleach stung eyes, but shame stung worse and finally moved. I wrote invoices by hand, shaky letters practicing responsibility again. Mark posted photos of his rig, hashtags bragging about hustle. He tagged clients Dad once courted with quiet, respectful visits. Comments praised him, forgetting who signed the anchor on paper. I didn't reply. I kept mopping until sunrise broke east. After finishing, I sat curbside, steam rising from wet pavement. "You'll thank me someday." Mark's message pinged, landing like a slap. I typed, then deleted, then saved anger for floor corners. I looked east and made a vow my father deserved. I would build something clean enough to reflect my name. When he finally thanked me, it wouldn't mean what he meant. Tessa showed up after her shift, carrying clipboards and stubborn hope. "You need schedules," she said, "and posts that show real work." We took photos of empty floors, corners, and shining baseboards. She built a simple website with hours, prices, and receipts. I practiced quotes until my math stopped, apologizing for itself. Hank loaned extension cords, cones, and a caution sandwich board. "Don't chase speed," he said. "Chase standards nobody else honors." We mapped routes between strip malls like truckers reading weather. My minivan smelled like disinfectant and tired victory after midnight. Sleep came in short bites, but discipline stitched mornings together. A former client laughed, seeing me scrub gum near entrances. "Didn't you run Granger Power Wash?" he asked, eyebrows raised high. "Not anymore," I said, wiping circles until his reflection appeared. He cleared his throat and held the door quietly for customers. Respect sometimes arrives late, walking backwards through embarrassment into decency. I banked cash deposits at a different branch across town. The teller smiled at receipts, printed clean and itemized carefully. "You're building something," she said, sliding envelopes with practiced efficiency. I nodded, because acknowledging progress strengthens it against old storms. Outside, cicadas droned while parking lot lights hummed like ballast. The co-signed debt shadowed everything, but it stopped steering me. Collection letters piled, yet clients paid, and crews trusted me. I was one invoice from sleeping somewhere better than weekly. Tessa insisted we separate accounts and build reserves before upgrades. Hank taught safety meetings, reminding us bodies pay hidden interest. I wrote a manifesto on a sticky note for dashboards. "Show up, leave proof, pay fair, speak plain, sleep clean," it read. Every night, I whispered it before unlocking another dark storefront. My father's wrench hung from the mirror, quiet and heavy. The future tightened its grip, but my hands tightened back. Near dawn, I parked behind the Civic Center loading dock. Steam rose from vents like ghosts escaping someone else's mistakes. I washed my hands in a utility sink stained permanent brown. My face looked tired, but my eyes finally held steady. "Thank me later," I imagined Mark saying, smirk wearing yesterday's victories. "I will," I answered aloud. but not for your reasons. I started the minivan and watched Beacon glow on magnets. The logo looked small, but morning made it feel enormous. I drove toward Capitol Boulevard, choosing work over war again. The day opened wide, and I stepped through without permission. The motel room smelled like soap that never won its fight with mildew. I woke up every morning to the sound of someone's TV next door and the hum of an old refrigerator fighting for its last breath. My credit cards were maxed, my savings gone, and the world shrunk to a single cracked mirror and a drawer full of receipts. The carpet felt damp, even when dry, as if it remembered every hopeless man who'd passed through. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Dad's face the day we lost him. Steady, disappointed, quiet. I wondered if he'd be proud of what I'd become, or if he'd call it running. My stomach growled like it had opinions about the matter. I reached for cold coffee on the nightstand and told myself out loud, "You're not done yet." The walls didn't answer, but silence was better than pity. By noon, I was outside, leaning against the minivan that doubled as storage and office. Flyers with Beacon's logo were piled in the passenger seat, wrinkled from heat. I drove through Raleigh, stopping at plazas, gyms, and churches, leaving business cards under doors and taped to vending machines. A few people smiled politely. Most ignored me, and one janitor threw my flyer in the trash right in front of me. "We got a guy," he said, smirking. I wanted to tell him that his guy would never show up after midnight when floors creaked with loneliness. Instead, I just nodded, picked up my flyer from the trash, and left. Pride doesn't clean floors, hands do. I had both, and that was still enough to start over. Back at the motel, I counted what little I had. 73, 3 days left on the room, and half a tank of gas. I almost called Mark that night. The number glowed on my phone like temptation wearing his name. I imagined his voice, smug and satisfied. "Told you so." I couldn't give him that satisfaction, not yet. So I scrolled through my contacts and landed on Hank. "Still breathing?" he said when he picked up. "Barely," I answered. "Good. Means you're still trying." He told me about an overnight cleaning job at a warehouse just outside town. Low pay, but steady. "You'll need mops and guts," he said. "You already got both." I borrowed supplies from him that same night. Buckets, gloves, 2 mops, and a pair of old boots. They didn't fit, but they'd do. The warehouse manager looked at me like I'd shown up begging, but he signed the form anyway. "You mess up once, you're gone," he said. "Understand?" I nodded, trying not to sound too grateful. The air inside smelled like cardboard, diesel, and resignation. I worked through the night, pushing a mop until my shoulders ached. The floors weren't just dirty, they were defiant. But I scrubbed until they shined, and when the lights reflected clean, I smiled for the first time in weeks. When I clocked out at dawn, Hank was waiting outside with 2 coffees. "Told you," he said. "Work heals." I laughed, voice cracking from exhaustion. "Feels like punishment," I said. "That's what healing feels like at first," he answered. He asked how much I made, and when I told him, he nodded. "Good start," he said. "Now double it, then we'll talk pride." He drove off, leaving the smell of motor oil and mentorship behind him. I watched his taillights fade and thought about Dad again. Maybe this was what rebuilding looked like. Quiet, invisible, but real. That afternoon, I stopped at Tessa's cafe, sweat drying on my shirt. She took one look at me and slid a sandwich across the counter. "On the house," she said. I shook my head, but she gave me that look that said arguing wasn't allowed. "You look like a man trying to outrun yesterday," she said. "I'm trying to build tomorrow," I replied. She smiled, poured me coffee, and asked how Beacon was doing. "Still shining," I said. She laughed. "Good. Keep polishing." It was the first normal conversation I'd had in months, and it felt like breathing again. The next few weeks blurred together. Warehouse shifts, late-night cleaning, motel mornings. I lived in a loop of exhaustion and hope. Every payday, I paid for another week at the motel and sent the rest to creditors. Some nights I parked outside houses just to look at porches with working lights. I told myself that someday I'd have one again. When doubt got loud, I replayed Hank's voice. "Work heals." When guilt crept in, I remembered Tessa's. "Keep polishing." And when I couldn't sleep, I whispered to Dad's memory that I was trying. One night, while scrubbing tile grout at a medical office, I found a reflection that wasn't mine. It was a version of me that didn't quit when it got ugly. That man stared back, older, harder, but calmer. I kept working, chasing that reflection until it stopped running. When I finished, the floor looked like forgiveness itself, quiet, steady, and earned. The doctor's wife came in early and saw the shine. "You did this yourself?" she asked. "Every inch," I said. She smiled. "You should put your name on it." I didn't, but her words stuck. Maybe Beacon wasn't just a company, it was a mirror. Later that month, the motel manager knocked on my door holding a note. "You got mail," he said. It was from Mark. Inside was a check for $200 with a note that read, "Told you so." I folded it once, twice, and dropped it in the trash. I didn't need his pity or his proof. I just needed one more chance to keep building. The next morning, I checked out of the motel, loaded my minivan with supplies, and parked behind an abandoned dry cleaner. The sun came up, gold over the cracked parking lot, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The minivan rattled like it was built out of promises and luck. Every night, I loaded buckets, cleaners, and rags into the back seat until it smelled like ammonia and perseverance. The dry cleaner's parking lot became my home base. One flickering light above my head, one electric outlet that sometimes worked. I wrote "Beacon After Hours" on a sheet of cardboard and taped it inside the windshield like a declaration. People laughed, but I wasn't selling pride. I was selling reliability. At 11 p.m., while most of the city slept, I clocked in with the moon as witness. The first job was a pawn shop off Glenwood, floors sticky with forgotten stories. I swept, mopped, and buffed until I could see my own reflection. When I locked up, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was proof. Every night after that, I hunted for more silence to earn. I found work anywhere light. Bulbs flickered, and no one else cared. A strip mall salon needed bathrooms cleaned twice a week. Paid cash. A church basement hired me for $40 a night. No paperwork. I learned which dumpsters to avoid, which doors stuck, which alarms lied. Some nights, I drove between jobs, eating cold fries, too tired to taste them. When exhaustion blurred vision, I remembered Mark's voice. "You'll thank me someday." The phrase turned into gasoline, burning steady in my veins. One night, I caught my reflection in a storefront and whispered, "Thank you, not yet." That whisper carried me through the hours when hope clocked out early. Tessa called it stubbornness. I called it breathing. After a month, I had 4 regular clients and barely enough to live. The van needed brakes, my shoes had holes, but invoices stayed paid. I learned to track every cent in a spiral notebook, no excuses. Tessa built a spreadsheet, colored green for paid, red for pending. She showed me how to set up a business account. No co-signers. "You're building real roots," she said. "Roots don't move when storms come." I laughed, tired but grateful. Hank dropped by with a toolbox and a pack of gloves. "You're past survival," he said. "Now comes the slow climb." I believed him because his voice carried the weight of earned truth. The city after midnight taught me how to listen. I heard what ambition sounded like when it wasn't pretending to be glamorous. It was mops dragging, dryers humming, distant trains calling through fog. Every job became personal, a quiet rebellion against everything Mark said I'd never manage. I polished counters until my reflection didn't look like a mistake anymore. People noticed the difference, not all at once, but steadily. A bakery owner left a thank you note taped to the door one morning. Didn't think floors could shine like hope. I kept it in my glove box like scripture. Little things started to mean more than any paycheck ever could. Of course, Mark noticed too. He called one evening just as I was closing a daycare job. "Heard you're cleaning floors now," he said, amusement dripping from his voice. Guess my plan worked. I didn't answer right away. He continued, "You needed humility, and now you got it. You'll thank me." I leaned against the mop handle and smiled into the dark. "I already did," I said, then hung up. He tried to break me into obedience, but all he'd done was carve out the man who could stand alone. The mop water smelled sweeter than victory. It smelled like independence. By summer, Beacon had a rhythm. Tessa ran scheduling from her laptop at the cafe, and I handled the grunt work. Hank joined part-time, calling himself Quality Control. He brought an old radio that played gospel songs through static. Clients started leaving good reviews online, small ripples reaching new customers. Reliable, honest, shows up even when it rains. That one line meant more than any trophy. I printed it and taped it above my dashboard. When exhaustion whispered, "You're not enough," I read it again until the lie shut up. Dignity, it turned out, was just consistency wearing calluses. Then came the night the church's water heater burst. Floodwaters spread across the basement, soaking carpet and hymnals. The pastor called in panic, voice breaking over the line. "Everyone else said tomorrow," he said. "Can you come now?" It was past midnight, but I didn't hesitate. Tessa brought towels, Hank loaded vacuums, and we worked until dawn. The next Sunday, the congregation clapped when the pastor told them what happened. I sat in the back pew, tired and hidden, smiling at the irony. They thought I'd saved their floor. I knew the truth. It had saved me. A week later, I parked behind the same church and stared at the rising sun. My body ached. but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. "You'll thank me someday," Mark had said. He was right. I did thank him, but not for his lessons. I thanked him for leaving, for underestimating me, for forcing me into the kind of loneliness that only discipline can fix. I thanked him for every door he slammed, because those echoes became my rhythm. And every time my reflection looked back from a clean floor, I saw not failure, but a man worth standing beside. The first summer's heat pressed against storefront glass like stubborn doubt. I learned which buildings trapped humidity like secrets after closing. Floors swelled slightly, and mop heads dragged like tired horses. Hank taught me to ring slower, letting fibers breathe between pulls. "Let the tool help," he said, voice patient as midnight freight. I stopped muscling everything and started listening for resistance changing tone. Buffers hummed smoother when I stopped treating them like punishment. Tessa timed routes so traffic lights cooperated with our trunkful schedules. Raleigh after midnight felt like a puzzle solved by rhythm. The city respected people who respected its sleeping heart. Invoices used to look like apologies stapled to hard work. Tessa reworded them until they read like agreements between equals. We listed line items, square footage, and labor hours without apology. Clients liked transparency more than discounts whispered in parking lots. I learned to say no to, "Can you just add?" Scope creep vanished when boundaries arrived, wearing printed letters. Hank carried copies inside a clipboard like quiet armor always. "Policies protect you when charm gets tired," he'd remind me softly. We posted terms online and stopped tripping over our own kindness. Professionalism became the kindness people trusted when storms eventually rolled through. Equipment maintenance separated amateurs from crews that grew without chaos. I assigned names to machines like teammates needing scheduled attention. Violet was the buffer. Duke was the carpet extractor. When Duke coughed, we paused jobs rather than forcing bad. Miracles. Breakdowns taught humility faster than any lecture about preparedness. Hank built a checklist laminated under shop lights behind coffee. Belts, pads, filters, cords, switches, and plugs, all checked before departures. We lost fewer minutes, which meant fewer apologies and delays. Reliability wasn't magic. It was boredom practiced until inspiring again. Boring excellence became our signature in every reflected window. Reputation arrived, where most people didn't notice excellence happening. Gas stations started leaving our magnets next to receipt cups. Night managers waved, then asked for quotes like neighbors sharing sugar. "You always show," one said, counting register drawers without looking up. Showing up became our brand, louder than any boosted post. Tessa built a simple review email with 2 sentences only. It asked politely, then linked to a page we owned. People wrote about honesty more than shine, which surprised me. Shine fades. Honesty sticks like paint on a primed wall. I started preferring compliments about character over compliments about convenience. We hired our first part-time cleaner, a student named Corey. His first night, he power-walked like the floor was late. Hank chuckled and slowed him with 2 fingers gently raised. "Speed lies until the rework bill arrives," he told Corey. I watched Corey adjust, shoulders relaxing into the unhurried tempo. We taught him corners first, then straightaways, then figure eights. He grinned when the buffer finally stopped fighting his nervous wrists. "It feels like skating," he said, surprised by the control. "Exactly," I replied, remembering my first graceful pass on tile. Mastery turned scary tools into friendly instruments, playing cooperation at volume. Scheduling grew complicated around holiday hours and event calendars. Tessa built color blocks that moved like Tetris across weeks. She taught me to forecast labor like weather, never perfect. I learned which clients underestimated their own messes before events. We padded buffers for the morning after confetti avalanche bookings. Churches called after pageants. Gyms called after tournaments. Bars called always. Hank joked we were historians documenting someone else's fun nightly. Our job wasn't glamorous, but it felt honorable anyway. We left places better than we found them, every single time. Improvement paid better than pride when morning lights clicked on. Money started arriving predictably, which felt like fresh air. I separated personal from business and stopped stealing from tomorrow. Tessa negotiated bulk supply pricing that trimmed waste without cruelty. We switched to concentrates that reduced plastic and lifted margins. I opened a savings account labeled "Break Glass for Breakdowns." Deposits began small, then grew like confidence, learning to walk. Late fees disappeared because we paid vendors before sunrise always. One supplier included a handwritten note that said, "You set standards." I kept it beside Dad's wrench hanging from the mirror. The past watched, but it no longer drove the wheel. Notices from debt collectors still landed like stones some weeks. I answered every call. No dramatics, just numbers and plans. Here's what I can pay on Friday became a ritual. Dignity survived better when honesty arrived with schedules attached. Mark sent another message, equal parts triumph and condescension combined. Saw your website, he wrote. Cute little hustle, little brother. I typed 3 replies and deleted them all slowly. Hank's advice echoed, don't wrestle in mud with people comfortable there. I muted the thread and polished a lobby until sunrise. Work, not words, carried me past mirror glass without flinching. Night after night, Beacon's rhythm settled into trusted repetition. Corey learned alarm codes and which janitors loved conversation breaks. Tessa printed name badges that felt bigger than plastic rectangles. Clients began leaving lights and thank you notes before locking doors. We answered with photos attached to each invoice as proof. Before and after shots became receipts stronger than signatures often. Raleigh started recognizing our vans parked under halogen moons. The city's late heartbeat matched our buffer's patient circular hum. We belonged to these hours that most people slept through. The dark stopped feeling empty and started feeling earned. I noticed something new while mopping a pediatric clinic lobby. The shine reflected a version of me who wasn't angry. He looked tired, sure, but his shoulders weren't carrying shame anymore. Revenge had changed shape without asking my permission first. It looked like employees clocking out smiling after hard work. It sounded like Tessa laughing over spreadsheets at 2 a.m. It felt like Hank's hand squeezing my shoulder after inspections. It tasted like diner eggs served by a server who now knew us. Dignity was a portfolio of ordinary moments done unusually well. We expanded routes east toward Nightdale and west toward Cary. Travel time taught us how maps burn money without warning. Tessa redrew routes so jobs clustered like friendly neighbors. We scheduled buffer dry times with precision instead of optimism. Clients appreciated when we declined unrealistic windows respectfully. Saying no delivered more yeses than chasing everything ever did. I stopped thinking like a miner and started thinking like a gardener. Plant good habits, water them, and stop digging up roots. Growth visited only where patients had already rented rooms. Beacon grew because we grew calmer about what mattered most. At 2 a.m., Raleigh taught me another hidden lesson. Security guards noticed which companies left doors quietly locked. They told property managers who asked casually during smoke breaks. That Beacon crew doesn't cut corners, one said, nodding towards us. Those 6 words opened 3 buildings without any bidding war. Reputation travels faster than salesmen when nights run quiet. We thanked the guard with coffee and silence respected. No speeches, just consistent proof packaged in cleaner mornings. Trust became the salary that kept renewing our name. We guarded it harder than any piece of equipment. Corey brought his cousin for an interview behind the cafe. Tessa asked 3 questions that didn't sound like interrogation drills. Can you show up tired and still do it right? He answered yes, and Hank watched his eyes for truth. We hired him part-time, starting with corners and baseboards. I ordered extra pads and another safety vest immediately. Teams multiplied only when training multiplied first consistently. We wrote a tiny handbook that fit inside pockets. 10 pages, plain language, no corporate thunder at all. People respected rules written by people who keep them too. The phone rang one afternoon while I fixed Violet's drive belt. A boutique manager on Glenwood spoke with urgency and fear. A pipe burst, she said. Water everywhere, please help us. I checked supplies, checked people, then checked timing and traffic. Tessa was already mapping routes, hearing the panic through tone. Hank grabbed the extractors without waiting for permission at all. Corey texted, I'm close, proving our crew understood emergency tempo. We loaded faster than we'd ever loaded anything before. The van doors slammed like a drum line, starting a parade. We chased headlights toward a decision that might change everything. We arrived to chaos and ankle-deep water. Paper shopping bags floated like drowned birds across the floor. The manager cried, but she kept unlocking doors anyway. We'll document everything, Tessa promised, snapping photos as proof. Hank coordinated power, pumps, and caution cones like choreography. I knelt into the water and started pulling rugs. Corey cleared pathways while customers pressed faces to the glass. The street shone with sirens reflecting on puddles everywhere. We worked like a choir following a practiced but urgent hymn. Somewhere in the mess, I realized we were absolutely ready. By dawn, the boutique's floor wasn't perfect, but it held. We stacked damaged stock and labeled every box for claims. The manager hugged Tessa and cried into a borrowed Beacon hoodie. Everyone else said morning, she whispered, shaking from exhaustion. Morning is too late for floors with water inside, I said. She nodded, promising a review and a recommendation to their landlords. Hank rested his palms against his knees and grinned. You remember this night, he said, breathless but proud. I looked at our team and believed every future promise. The city opened its eyes, and we were still standing. The boutique looked like a battlefield made of fabric and perfume. Water glistened across the tile, running in patterns that caught sunrise through broken blinds. I stood in the doorway with boots already soaked, smell of bleach fighting panic. Power's cut, Hank called. Flashlight bouncing off mannequins knocked sideways. Tessa snapped photos for insurance, each click steady like heartbeat. Focus, she said, voice all business now. Corey dragged wet racks into the alley while traffic began waking up outside. The boutique owner stood trembling near the counter, whispering, "Everything's ruined." I looked around, then said, "Not if we start fast enough." Her eyes found mine, and hope replaced despair's first grip. We worked like clock gears turning under floodlight glow. Hank manned the extractor, hoses slithering across the slick floor. Tessa cataloged damage, voice low but calm over the storm's echo. I followed behind, scraping puddles into drains, watching colors return. Every swipe brought order back, inch by careful inch. Corey ran for towels and kept spirits alive with terrible jokes. "At least the mannequins are waterproof," he said, making the owner laugh weakly. For 6 hours, we fought the water and our own fatigue. The sun climbed higher, light bending through the soaked windows. By mid-morning, the boutique looked less like disaster, more like survival. When we finished, Tessa uploaded time-stamped photos to the landlord's portal. The owner hugged her so hard she nearly dropped her tablet. "Everyone else said no until Monday," the woman said, shaking. "You didn't even ask what it paid." I smiled, exhausted but proud. "We'll bill it fair," I said. "Right matters more than rush." She nodded, wiping mascara streaks with trembling fingers. "Your company name fits," she said. "You showed up when it was darkest." Outside, the pavement steamed, the smell of rain mixing with detergent. Hank leaned on the van and said quietly, "That job just bought you a seat at a bigger table." He was right. 2 days later, a property management firm emailed Tessa directly. They'd seen the photos, heard the story, and wanted Beacon to quote 3 apartment complexes. It felt like someone opened a door I didn't know existed. "Play it cool," Hank said, grinning, "but not too cool." Tessa drafted the proposal with details neat enough for law textbooks. We submitted within 48 hours. No gimmicks, no false charm, just proof. When the acceptance email arrived, I sat in silence before reading it twice. "We got it," Tessa whispered, then screamed. Hank slapped my shoulder, laughing loud enough to scare the pigeons. For the first time, Beacon wasn't chasing. It was being chased. Mark found out before I could tell him myself. A week later, his company's logo appeared on the competitor list for the same contract. He'd underbid by 10%, banking on connections, but inspectors caught cut corners and expired safety certs. The firm canceled his deal before sunrise Monday. That afternoon, he called. "You're welcome," he said, bitterness hiding under forced humor. "Wouldn't have pushed you without me." I paused, then said, "You're right about that." He didn't expect grace and didn't know what to do with it. "We should grab lunch," he muttered. "Maybe," I said, then hung up gently. Revenge felt better when it didn't need an audience. The next few months blurred into paperwork and motion. We trained new hires, bought uniforms, and moved operations into a rented warehouse. Tessa handled payroll. Hank ran orientation. I spent my nights repairing machines and remembering nights I almost quit. Every Friday, I drove past the boutique on Glenwood. The window now displayed a new sign, "Restored, thanks to Beacon After Hours." That line did more for marketing than any advertisement could. People stopped seeing us as cleaners. They saw us as rescuers. Pride can be dangerous, but that kind fed something worth keeping. Dignity finally had a storefront of its own. Still, success came with sleepless hours and quiet tension. One night, I woke to my phone buzzing. Our crew van had stalled mid-route. Hank fixed it with duct tape and sheer willpower, but I knew we'd outgrown patchwork. We met the next morning in the warehouse with coffee strong enough to solve problems. "We need maintenance contracts," Tessa said. "Prevent chaos before it starts." We drafted them that day and added response clauses for emergencies. Clients signed faster than expected. Stability attracts stability. Every policy was a brick, building walls that fear couldn't climb. The past still whispered, but the future finally spoke louder. Autumn arrived with gold leaves and quiet recognition. The Chamber of Commerce invited Beacon to a small business expo downtown. Tessa ordered banners. Hank ironed shirts. I practiced a smile that didn't look stunned. The boutique owner stopped by our booth, handing out referrals like friendship bracelets. "You don't just clean floors," she told people. "You fix faith." That night, as we loaded the van, I saw Mark across the parking lot. He was shaking hands with an insurance rep, wearing the same grin he'd used on me years ago. He caught my eye, hesitated, then looked away first. That was better than any trophy. When we got home, the crew celebrated with pizza on the warehouse floor. Corey raised a slice like a toast. "To water damage and miracles," he said. Everyone laughed, tired but glowing. Hank leaned back against a crate, humming along to the radio. Tessa looked at me and said, "You built this, Elliot, out of nothing but nerve." I thought about the motel nights, the pawn shop smells, the signatures that stole my credit. Then I looked around at my people, the family that chose me. "No," I said softly, "we built this." And for the first time, I believed it. The Civic Center glittered under strings of white lights, like the city had dressed up to remember good things. The Chamber of Commerce called it a night for resilience, and somehow Beacon After Hours made the list of honorees. I stood in the lobby wearing my only suit, the one that still smelled faintly of polish. "You nervous?" Tessa asked, pinning my name badge straight. "I'm fine," I lied. Hank grinned, holding a camera he didn't know how to use. "Smile like you mean it," he said. Corey tugged at his tie, whispering, "Feels like we snuck into somebody else's dream." I looked around at the crowd, and for a moment, I agreed with him. But then I saw our banner near the stage, small but unmissable, and I realized the dream belonged to us now. Music filled the hall, slow jazz floating through the chatter of plates and speeches. Business owners mingled, shaking hands with city officials and pretending confidence was casual. When they called Beacon's name, applause rose softer than thunder, but heavier than air. I walked on stage, heart drumming like a machine still warming up. The mayor smiled and said, "For turning hard times into honest work, we recognize Beacon After Hours." The plaque felt heavier than gold, but lighter than regret. Tessa snapped photos, tears glinting behind the lens. I thanked the crowd, stumbled through words about second chances and small beginnings. "We just show up," I said simply, and the audience actually stood. For a man once told he wasn't dependable, that sound was redemption itself. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed, asking for quotes like bees at bloom. "How did you bounce back after your brother's business shut you out?" one asked. I blinked, caught off guard by how fast the truth had traveled. "By keeping my head down and my work clean," I said. "They wrote it down like poetry, though it wasn't meant to be clever." Hank nudged me, whispering, "You just made tomorrow's headline." We laughed, relief cutting through the noise. Tessa handed me a glass of water, pretending it was champagne. "We've come far," she said, clinking her cup against mine, "and it's just the beginning." I looked at the plaque again, the words etched deeper than I expected. "You're right," I said. "This isn't the finish line. It's the doorway." Mark appeared an hour later, uninvited but unsurprised. He wore the same confident posture I remembered from the credit union years ago. "Well," he said, eyes scanning the banner, "you made it out clean after all." His smile didn't reach his eyes. It hung there, brittle as glass. "Congratulations," he added, tone too polite to trust. I thanked him anyway, because dignity doesn't bow to sarcasm. "Dad would have been proud," he said, testing me. "He'd be happy to see the family name shining again." I nodded, steady, knowing that the only name shining tonight was Beacon, not Granger. For the first time, that truth didn't sting. It settled. He followed me to the refreshment table, filling silence with nervous chatter. "You know," he said, "I was trying to teach you to survive." I raised an eyebrow. "By wrecking my credit?" He shrugged. "By toughening you up. You were too soft." I took a sip of water, calm, watching him avoid my reflection in the glass. "Guess your plan worked," I said. "I'm tougher than you remember." His jaw tightened, but he forced a laugh. "Well," he said, "guess I get some of the credit then." I smiled faintly. "You already took plenty," I said, walking away before bitterness could follow. Outside, the night was cool, the streets glowing under the last of the rain. I stepped onto the plaza, the city humming softly around me. Hank and Tessa joined, their laughter echoing against the marble steps. "You handled that well," she said. "Better than I would have." I shrugged. "Anger's expensive. I can't afford it anymore." Hank chuckled, handing me his jacket. "That's wisdom right there," he said. "Costs time to earn, but pays every day." Corey waved from across the street, holding takeout boxes. "Pizza or burgers?" he shouted. "Both," I said. "Tonight, we celebrate clean, the kind of clean that has nothing to do with floors." We ate sitting on the loading ramp behind the Civic Center, Suits wrinkled, shoes scuffed, hearts full. Think the news will mention us? Corey asked through a mouthful of fries. If they do, spell my name right, I said, and everyone laughed. Hank leaned back against the railing, eyes half closed. Funny thing about redemption, he said. You don't notice when it starts, only when it's done. Tessa nodded. You notice the quiet after the noise. I looked toward the skyline, remembering the motel, the minivan, the ring of the mop bucket. The city hadn't changed. I had, and that was enough to make every street look new again. When we packed up, Mark was still standing by his car across the plaza. He looked smaller than I remembered, as if ambition had shrunk him instead of feeding him. For a moment, I almost walked over, almost offered peace, but he turned away first, checking his phone, already somewhere else in his mind. Tessa caught my hesitation and said softly, "He'll come around when he's ready." I nodded, though I wasn't sure that time would ever come. Some lessons take longer to teach than to learn. I watched the taillights fade into the city glow and whispered, "You were right, Mark. I thanked you, but not how you meant." That night, sleep came easier than it had in years. I dreamed of floors reflecting not just light, but faces, people who believed in me when belief felt foolish. The dream ended with Dad's voice, soft and proud. "That's my boy." I woke before dawn, the city still hushed under a gray-blue sky. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages from strangers saying Beacon's story had inspired them. I sat on the edge of the bed, smiling into the quiet. For once, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace, arriving right on schedule. The envelope came 2 weeks after the Civic Center event, delivered by courier. No return address, just my name in neat handwriting I hadn't seen since Dad's funeral. Inside was a check, 5 figures, and a short note, "For what I owe you. Let's start over, Mark." I sat at my desk, the air thick with déjà vu. Money has a smell when it's meant to fix something it broke. It smells like apology and power mixed together. I turned the check over, studying my brother's looping signature. "He's reaching out," Tessa said from across the office. "That's a peace offering." I nodded, but my gut disagreed. "It's an invoice," I said, "and I already paid my debt." Later that afternoon, Mark called before I could decide what to do. "You get my letter?" he asked, voice rehearsed, maybe even hopeful. "I did," I said. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he said quickly. "It's time we fix things." I leaned back, letting him fill the silence he'd earned years ago. "You mean now that the papers are calling Beacon a model business?" I asked. He hesitated, then laughed softly. "Come on, Elliot. It's not like that." I pictured him in his office, blinds drawn, phone on speaker, still trying to control the narrative. "You always said I'd thank you someday," I said quietly. "I just never thought you'd charge interest." He sighed, the sound of someone losing grip on an old script. "You don't understand," he said. "I was trying to protect you. You weren't ready to run a company. I didn't want you to get crushed under all that pressure." I almost laughed, but it came out as air instead. "So, you crushed me first?" He went silent long enough for truth to echo between us. "You were always soft," he said, voice smaller now. "You'd rather fix than fight." I smiled, because he was right. But he didn't realize fixing takes more strength than fighting ever will. "You're confusing mercy for weakness again," I said. "It's an old habit, Mark." That night, I drove to the shop and sat in the dark. The plaque from the Civic Center glowed faintly under the security light. I thought about everything his money could buy. New gear, new vans, maybe expansion into another county. But it couldn't buy what I'd built with Hank, with Tessa, with sweat that no one loaned me. I picked up the check, tore it in half, and dropped it into the trash. Then I wrote him an email. "Mark, you're right. I'm stronger than I used to be. But it's not because of the money I lost. It's because I learned to live without it. If you really want to start over, come by the shop tomorrow." No business talk, just truth. I hit send before I could second-guess it. He showed up the next morning, wearing work boots I doubted had touched dirt in years. "Place looks good," he said, scanning the warehouse. "Clean." I chuckled. "You taught me that cleanliness counts." He smirked. "I guess I did." We sat at my workbench, coffee between us, silence hanging like an overdue bill. "I know you tore the check," he said. "Earl told me." I nodded. "You can't buy clean slates, Mark. You earn them." His eyes dropped to his hands, callus-free, soft. "Then let me earn it," he said. "Teach me how to start again." For the first time, he didn't sound like my opponent. He sounded like my brother. I gave him a list instead of a lecture. Training programs, certification courses, suppliers that didn't cheat workers. "Learn what honest labor feels like," I said. "You'll sleep better." He took the paper, studying it as though it was written in another language. "This doesn't sound easy," he muttered. "It isn't," I said. "That's the point." He looked up and smiled barely. "You sound like Dad." The words hit soft but landed deep. "Then maybe we're finally doing something right," I I said. He folded the paper neatly, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Guess I'll see if I can pass your test, he said, half grinning. It's not my test, I replied. It's yours. After he left, Hank came out from the back room, wiping his hands. That conversation sound like healing or paperwork? He asked. Little of both, I said. He wants back in. Hank nodded slowly. Careful which door you open. Not all ghosts are ready for daylight. I smiled, knowing he was right. Maybe. But I'll meet him halfway at the porch. Hank laughed. That's where forgiveness usually sits anyway. I watched the road long after Mark's truck disappeared. The sun reflected off the cracked windshield like a second chance, trying not to blind me. A week passed before I heard from him again. He texted a photo of a workshop, dusty, half empty, but real. Rented a space, the message read. Taking your advice. Maybe I'll learn something this time. I stared at it for a long moment before replying. If you need extra hands, I've got a kid named Corey who'll teach you more than you expect. He sent a thumbs up emoji. It wasn't much, but it was more than all the checks in the world. Some debts don't need to be paid. They need to be understood. That evening, Tessa found me staring at the torn check pieces still sitting in the trash. You could have framed that, she said. Proof you won. I shook my head. I didn't win. I just stopped keeping score. She smiled. That's better. We locked up, lights dimming one by one. Outside, the air smelled like rain and renewal. As I turned the key, I whispered to the night, You were right, Mark. I did thank you. Just not the way you planned. The wind caught the words and carried them off, quiet and satisfied. Morning sunlight poured through the shop windows, landing on the same plaque that had once felt too heavy to touch. Now it looked at home beside framed pay stubs, crew photos, and a faded note that read, Show. Up. Leave proof. Pay fair. Sleep clean. I stood with a mug of coffee, listening to the city hum awake outside. The trucks were already out, routes mapped, clients waiting. Tessa waved from her desk, tapping numbers into the computer like music. You're quiet today, she said. That's rare. I smiled, staring at the plaque. Just thinking, I said, about how much noise used to mean success. She laughed softly. Turns out peace makes the better soundtrack. I nodded. She was right. Silence, when earned, feels louder than applause. Later that day, I drove out to Dad's old lot. The chain-link gate still leaned sideways, weeds curling through gravel like stubborn memories. The old sign, Granger Power Wash, hung crooked, paint peeling, letters fading toward irrelevant. I parked, stepped out, and walked the perimeter slow. This was where everything started and ended the day Mark shut me out. I picked up a rusted bolt from the ground, maybe once part of a machine we'd fixed together. You said I'd thank you someday, I whispered to the open air. You were right, just not the way you meant. I left the bolt on the fence post and smiled. You taught me what not to build, and that's worth something. The wind carried the smell of rain and cut grass across the lot. I thought of the crew, Corey, who'd just started night classes, Hank, who was finally taking weekends off, Tessa, who had offers from other firms but stayed anyway. I thought of Mark, too, texting photos of his dusty workshop every few days, progress in pixels and humility. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was movement. Dad used to say, a good day's work builds bridges nobody sees. I understood it now. You don't fix family in one apology. You fix it the same way you polish floors, slow, circular, steady, until the reflection comes back. I went back to the shop and found the crew eating sandwiches by the loading bay. Boss, you look like you've been somewhere heavy, Corey said, mouth full. Just revisiting old ghosts, I said. Hank grinned. You tell him who's boss? I shook my head. No, just told him I was done being haunted. Tessa handed me a sandwich, smiling. Good, we've got living to do. We ate together, laughter bouncing off the concrete walls. The smell of polish and bread filled the air. I looked around the room. This family I didn't inherit, but built. They weren't replacements for what I lost. They were proof that love can start over without permission. In the afternoon, I checked my email and saw one from Mark. No subject line, just 2 sentences. Finished the first job today. Didn't break anything. Paid my crew on time. I stared at the screen for a long moment, a quiet warmth creeping up behind my wrist. I typed back, that's how you start. Keep showing up. I hesitated, then added, proud of you, big brother. My fingers hovered over the send button before finally pressing it. Some battles end not with victory, but with understanding that you never needed one. I closed the laptop and felt lighter than I had in years. That evening, the sky blushed orange over the Raleigh skyline. I took a walk down Glenwood, past the boutique that had once nearly drowned. The owner was closing up, her smile bright as ever. You still keeping folks dry? She called. Trying my best, I said. You do more than try, she replied, locking the door. You show up. Those words followed me all the way home. I passed shop windows reflecting the man I'd become. Not the one who'd signed a bad loan, but the one who'd built clean floors on broken ground. For the first time, I didn't flinch from the mirror. I nodded at it like an old friend. When I got back to the shop, the crew had already left. The air was still, machines unplugged, papers stacked neatly on desks. I walked to the bench and found Dad's wrench, the one I'd kept since day one. I hung it on the wall beside the plaque. "We're good now," I said quietly. "The name doesn't have to shine. The work does." Outside, a thundercloud grumbled in the distance, rolling like applause from a faraway crowd. I switched off the lights and stood for a moment, letting darkness fill the room with peace instead of fear. Some nights, silence is the loudest success you can earn. Before I locked the door, I left a beacon key on the workbench. It was for Mark, not an invitation, an option. The same way Hank once gave me mine when I didn't think I deserved it. I stuck a note under it. "When you're ready to start early and stay late, this opens more than doors." The metal gleamed under the faint glow of the exit sign. I knew he'd find it eventually, and I knew what it would mean. Forgiveness doesn't erase debt. It teaches you how to stop collecting interest on pain. Driving home, I rolled the windows down and let warm air rush through. Neon lights flickered by, reflections bouncing across the windshield like small reminders of how far I'd come. I passed the credit union, the same one where Mark made me sign that first paper, and didn't feel bitterness anymore. Just gratitude, sharp and strange. Every scar had turned into a map leading right here. I whispered to the night, "You were right, Mark. I did thank you, just not the way you planned." Then I laughed, because it felt good to mean it. If this story moved you, please like and share. And tell me, should I forgive my brother completely and hand him that key, or let him earn it one late night at a time?